yourself, as in relation to like what you studied and what you're teaching in a way.
Okay.
So, in relation to what you're teaching in your seminars.
Okay, at the moment.
Yeah.
All right, it's quite a mixture. I have an MA in Leadership and Change, which was from a business school in Exeter University. So I sometimes use some of that academic studies and research into the workshop, but I don't do things academically. I like to do them with fun, playing games, and laughter for me is very important in the development of actually making any shift happening. So I embed these in, but I don't go down, get a board and start sitting down, and it's actually experiencing the information that I'm sharing. There's a lot of influence from neuro-linguistic programming, because it's a wonderful way of capturing the metaphors in the mind and how you can then play with them creatively and then put them back in, so it helps change patterns that may be not beneficial at the moment where you want to go for your next step. I use improvisation. It's for me is a very big influence in the workshop, from comedy improvisation to painting improvisation to dance improvisation. I think life is very much an improvisation more than it is a script, and that ability to let go and allow life to emerge and actually listen to life and allow that to follow takes a lot of stress away of trying to hold things down and consciously get to a certain place. I think it's beneficial, but I think the ability to be flexible and move with stuff allows the body to be in a more relaxed state. So I suppose those are my main influences into the workshop. And also I get people to actually, I teach them how to choreograph, and I get them to choreograph their negative and positive metaphors. So it's very hands-on, and that's the direction we go with the workshops.
Okay. I thought, maybe it's just the way I remembered it. So it's nothing related to like psychology or...
well, NLP...
Cognitive therapy, is it like a creative cognitive therapy in a way?
Yeah, you could say that. I don't know much about cognitive therapy myself. I have a trouble saying that word as well. But NLP is, I've been told there's similarities. NLP has taken stuff from all sorts of therapies, from family therapy to hypnosis to metaphor recreation. They argue they've taken the bits that work very well and put it together in a package. So it's very much on dealing with the how and the what in a problem, not so much the why.
And then you're of course a dancer as well, so it all just links, or explore and use the methods in your, like when you were a dancer, or did it come afterwards? Or?
There was a slight overlap coming to the end of my career, where I found that a lot of stress has a physical relationship to it, and that this compression that you place in the body, dance is a wonderful way of releasing and energizing the flow of the body. And I found for myself, when I was in a state of performance, 100% performing on stage, when you're in the zone, the past and the future disappear, and there's this wonderful moment of just being in the present. And I found that when you release this tension that can be held, you get to that state when you're being creative and you're playing. So there was a similarity of almost when you're dancing, I find that you're in a hypnotic state and you're just letting go and you're connected, you become whole, and this whole dualism idea that the head and the body are separate just doesn't exist. You are just one being. And I think that when you're letting go of all the negative triggers that have, or gestalts that have placed themselves onto your psychology, when you let that go, you get back into that state where you're more in the flow than having to like push and react to life instead of flowing with it.
Okay, that makes sense. I can really relate to it, and because as a designer, you always have to be aware of the practical thing. I came to a point where I just had to like let go and relax in a way.
Yes, yeah.
So the way you've been teaching your seminars, is it both for individuals, or is it groups, or is it mostly in the creative field, or is it interdisciplinary?
Yes. I think it's a real mix because I'm working at the moment with kids that have been kicked out of school, and it's helping them find their connection to who they are because of their experience. Sometimes this has been taken away. But I also do corporations as well. I've done workshops for like in the Bank of England, and I've done HSBC, which is a bank here. They've also brought down their staff to one of my workshops, and I've also done it for young people with learning disabilities as well. So what I find very interesting, it doesn't really matter. The spectrum seems is the same. The challenges that we have and the way we lock in. Of course, it's may be more intense than one individual than the next, but there's a similarity of getting too much in the head and not enough in the whole body, that the head and the body become one. And it doesn't matter if you're doing financial accounting or if you've got problems with passing your exam. There seems to be a similarity of get out of the head and into the body, and you can start to get more connected to your higher potential.
Yeah, and focus. If I go like deeper into the mind, the power it has over you, and if you can explain a little bit about that. And also, I remember you said like it takes split seconds to go from positivity to negativity.
Right, yes. So what I find interesting is when we try hard, when we focus in and concentrate. It's one of these things when you're told at school, concentrate. I don't know if you experienced this, but this kind of, it actually closes the mind down. So when we get into a state where we're like concentrate, we narrow it into a place where we're not open for allowing things to come in. It's very important that you get to a place where you can open up the mind, that you're opening, because the more you open, we're only meant to be conscious of just a small part of our brain. And if we want to get anywhere near to expand our consciousness to a wider range, we have to relax and open and get ourselves into a kind of rhythm that connects to that part of our consciousness. And unfortunately, what happens is when we lock in, we just eliminate so much information. So when I'm working in my workshops with participants, it's really about opening up the mind, opening up. And I suppose as you open up this idea that's in your mind, I mean, that in its sense is restrictive. It's if you put the focus in the heart, you put it in the stomach already, it just changes a relationship with knowledge. So I think we've been kind of dropped into a society, the soup of the society that we live in. And it's just remind us that there may be other possibilities. And this is just a segment in time where we've made these choices on how to react to our consciousness and our mind. And it's just that shifting to just incorporate everything is a process I think that we're going through at the moment. Mm-hmm. There was another question on that. Did I?
Yeah, in a way. And my next one is like trying to remember the unconscious mind. So don't you? Because I have this is also what I have. Thinking consciously can be daunting. So, isn't it in a way limited to try and think unconsciously? Does that make sense?
Yeah, almost. Let me see. Limiting to try and think unconsciously. I think if I'm understanding it correctly, it's almost if we use the idea of the brain. I'm gonna have to use this as more of a metaphor because I'm not a neuroscientist.
Yeah.
But the neocortex, the newer part of the brain, is very good at just bringing in certain factual information, and the limbic part of the brain, which is the emotional part of the brain, is about experiencing the world. And I think art is a wonderful way of communicating to that part of the brain that is experiencing the world. So if we try to connect with that part, as in try to think about, we're using the same part of the brain that has the limitation. where language is, and then language likes facts, and it all can get stuck in that kind of surface area. But if we get into the part of the brain which is about experience, memory, learning, then this is where when we just dance or we sing or we have fun or become playful, then we actually are communicating to that part of the brain that is actually dealing with a lot of the things that we need to shift.
Okay.
So yeah, it's getting out of that kind of frontal part of the new part of the brain and getting to the more emotional part.
Also have you going up in your mind, chunking up and chunking down.
Right, yes.
Could you explain about what you mean by that?
Yeah,
Chunking up,
okay.
chunking-
The idea is that there's some people are big thinkers, like they just like to look at the whole big picture, and some people are detailed. They love the detail, and they go detail, detail, detail. Now, some people can do both, of course, but the idea here is that we have to be able to swing between these mind states to help us in creative. Because sometimes you have to be big thinking, but you're only big thinking, you may not get what is necessary to put the foundation to move things forward. So it's training yourself to know, oh, I am in a big thinking state now, but now I need to go back to detail. But sometimes people get lost in detail and they don't see the big picture. So it's shifting from these mindsets to make sure that you're covering these areas. And also in communication, if you're communicating with somebody who's a detailed-minded person, your big picture, you can get very irritated very quickly. They want to know specifics, and the other person just wants to get on and kind of feel their way through it. So it's understanding that sometimes people who are more, maybe have a bias to one way of thinking, that you may bring yourself down to their state to communicate what you need to communicate, and you could lead them into big thinking after they feel satisfied that their information is fulfilled. So it's understanding how our way of communicating, the way we think, the way we may be biased to one way, but we still have to incorporate another one, and just dancing between these states.
Do you often come into seminars because there is a problem there underlying, or is it just because you're coming in to teach the way of thinking, or the way to communicate, or methods to work better, or
it's a mixture, really. Sometimes I go in just to help with creative thinking. Sometimes I'm going in because there is a stagnation going in with the energy of the group, and I get them focused on what is this we're doing, what's the main thing we're doing, because this is where it can get lost in the detail, but what is the highest point that we're trying to achieve here, and remember and work down from that. And sometimes people come with a problem intentionally to the workshop to let it go. So by the end of the workshop, the problem will have less energy to it. So they actually experience what it's like to come in there holding the problem, and then at the end not having that same kind of charge to it. And that in itself reminds us that our brains are, we create some of our limitations, and how by understanding that and experiencing that you can actually shift, and you can go away with that with tools to go, okay, hold up a second, I don't have to be locked into this belief system. I've created it, and I've got some tools now to how to actually manipulate it and make it a little bit more flexible.
One of the topics I remember was to objectify the problem and putting it in front of you.
Yeah.
And I remember, is it from you that when you're working together to never say no, rather say yes but?
Yes. It's actually yes and. It's
yes and.
Yes, the but is actually a negative. It actually cuts it off again. But yes, that's the idea. Is I think it's just one form of creative, an element of creative thinking, but it's one to really be aware of. Is that we live in a society that is very argumentative based. That we almost have this testosterone, the one with the strongest one with a stronger argument is going to win, and the actual subject that you're trying to achieve can be sacrificed because it's the ego's getting in place of actually just winning and making the statement and going home thinking, yeah, I won that. And yes and really puts you in a win-win situation where it's about collaboration and collective, not to get too airy, collective consciousness, that by building together, one, you feel good inside yourself, so you're opening up for more ideas, and you get that human bond with another person to build an idea, which becomes very exciting, and then you have, when you feel secure and you can be vulnerable, then you can really open up that creative gold nugget that can sit right deep down. But if you're getting no and you're getting restriction, you're not going to share as much. And we share a lot more with other human beings when we feel safe. And yes and is a way of putting us into that safe, playful area. But it's also to be mindful that there's times where you have to say no because you're saying yes to yourself. But you actually, so it's yes and is for certain creative thinkings when situations when you decided this is what you're building on. But it could be a bit codependent just to say yes and to everything and not take yourself into that situation. So it's just using it in the right place for openly creating it, and again having that feeling of being able to be vulnerable.
And not for the mind to go in lockdown in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Because as soon as you get into a state of fear, and when somebody says no, you can feel that you're under attack. And if you feel that you're under attack, your hormones are going to rush into your mind to fight, flight, or freeze. That is not a place that you can be at your most creative. Maybe there's a little bit of stress kind of in there that can create creativity. But if you're going to do it on long term, that's just going to the energy that you need to sustain yourself in a respectful communication manner is going to sacrifice that openness to be fully creative with another person.
If you could just tell me a little bit how, like the methods that you're using in your, for example, about putting the problem in front of you or objectifying the problem.
Right, that one, I got that one from NLP. Through NLP, it gives you examples of what it's like to actually be in a problem and then to actually be and move it away and have that distance. So that is a very typical strategy I would use if I would say I was doing one-on-one coaching with somebody. That's an NLP technique I do to help them view a problem from a distance. And it's come to that kind of thing, is like if you have a problem, you can feel that you're lost in it. And you may see a friend with exactly the same problem, and you go up and you say, well, that's simple, it's da 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 da, because it's not suffocating you. There's some distance, and then you can use your resources to answer the questions. And that's basically what you're doing with yourself. You're getting that distance, so you're not so. It takes away the emotional charge from it.
Yeah. If you could tell me a little bit, like that you're working on, and going back. You're in a negative place, and going back to when you were in a positive place.
Right. Okay.
Trying to think. I mean, you explained it almost as a path.
All right. So there's always a paradox in this, but I'm a bit wary of this positive thinking culture that we're in.
Okay.
It's almost an occult, that if you don't think positively, you get punished. Which, what do you mean? How can you be positive and then punish somebody for being negative? Because then that's a negative kind of statement. So it's kind of it's almost like the Enron example of, they were like, if you questioned anything, that you would be fired because you're getting out the vibe. We've got to be positive. Got to be positive. So yeah. So I am all into positivity. I think it really is important for the place of the body, but negative emotion is also important. The signals that we're having and they can be very helpful. Fear, anger, as long as they don't become moods that drown us, they can be very good guidelines of how to move from one section to the other. And so I think to just look at only positive states is not really incorporating what we are as human beings. But I think the trouble is when we get flooded by negative emotions, then it can become toxic. Just allowing these messages to come up, and if you get a feeling that something's not right, it can save a lot of heartache in the end. There can be an intuitive kind of internal tacit information that's coming out and saying, this is not going to work. Because sometimes it doesn't. And you have to put it out there and you have to discuss it. and through that you can then add more creative thinking into it to alleviate those problems. But just to ignore it and say let's just be positive, I think has a naivety of the guidance of negative. It's not even negative. It's looking at the where things could go wrong. But I think there needs to be a time and a place to do that. If you're doing yes and you come and go no, I'm not gonna. It's cross functional. You've got to find a place, and we go, okay, now we've created the apple's grown off the tree. Now we can go say, okay, let's have a look at it. And I think I'm mixing two things up here, but when we're talking about creative thinking, people coming too early with criticism, and that can kill an idea. I think you have to be secure before you criticize an idea or get feedback into it. When you have these feelings of fear or something's not going to be right, there needs to be a way of creating healthy dialogue to actually confront the situations. So I think it's important to deal with it in a positive way, but say just to push any kind of negative outlook on stuff, I think misses the whole picture. So I think that's what I was meaning by looking at problems, that we don't just only just float around in the kind of naive positivity. And then what was the other one? The other one was yes, I got it. Yeah. So basically, what happens is it's almost a little bit like having the observer. It's that when you put yourself into a good place, you've got more resources to come in. So when you're in a good place that hasn't got its triggers, emotional triggers. Do you know what I mean by triggers? It's like when something's happened to you and something reminds you of it and it sets off a reaction to it. If you put yourself into a place where those never happened, and then you start to look at it from there, and this is where positive thinking is great, and you look at it from what is the positive element of that? It can start to give freedom to the memory. It can start to shake it up a bit, so it's just not drowning in the trauma of the situation. There's actually something in there that makes me who I am today in a positive light. So when that happens, it starts to give you a little bit of freedom, and the things that hold you down can let go, and then you can start to move on in the direction that you want to do. You're not dragging this baggage around with you.
Yeah. Just like a side, do you think like positivity is overused in the same way as happiness in a way? Is it? Would you have a connection there, or?
I'm not quite. I'd have to think about that one for a while, but just on the top of my head, there's this whole idea that happiness and sadness are just a circulation of emotion, that one can't exist without the other. It's through these waves of emotions that we can actually feel the extent of what one is and the other. Because I think you can be very positive, and it's also defining what happiness means. If we're talking about the kind of way state, or is it the state of just being? So there's a few things in here to kind of list before trying to have some thoughts on it. But I think I'd have to. Sorry?
It also probably depends on the character. Like, if you're negative, you can be negative, but you can be happy. Or you can be very practical and then negative but happy.
Yeah, I think it's quite complex, and exactly so.
Yeah.
And then it relates to the individual and how the individual defines themselves as happy, and how they define themselves as sad. I think it's a connection with the world around us, a healthy connection with the world around us. And if that's happiness, then I think that's very, very important. And I think that in itself will lead to a healthy positive state. So in that respect, I think the two are entwined together.
Okay, makes sense. So I'm guessing you also base a lot on your own experience, especially when you're teaching kids that are not in the regular, don't fit the frame.
Very much so. I think everything that I share is something that I have a passion about, and I would like to say most of it is something that I've evolved. I've evolved from one state to another state, and then I want to share this with somebody else so that maybe they can also not have to go through the long, tedious journey of getting from one place to the next. So this information maybe give them at least jump over one hurdle. So it's very much about how I've experienced creative development, how the stresses have engulfed me in life, and how I've moved from one place to another. And sometimes they're an interest that I have at the moment where I'm actually in a process of unraveling a certain stress place, and then I'll share that. But it's very much about life experience supported by theories and also academic writing. So I like to mix the two in because I think it has to be, to learn, for me, I find learning encouraging when the person sharing the information is passionate about what they do. It becomes infectious. So I choose to share what I'm passionate about and what is my challenge or what has been my challenge.
When you look back, do you think it's part of the process to do the hard stuff to get to the positive place?
Yes, I think so. At the moment, I think one of the things, and it's not always the case. Sometimes I think sometimes you're in the flow and things just go tick, 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 and they take. But what I've experienced, most births are painful, and change comes. It's from human beings to creative. When a birth is happening, there's a pain that seems to be a partner of it. That's just my experience. I'm not saying that's the case, but there's been a pain that's been through that birth, and the results of that birth can be absolutely fantastic. But I think for a growth to happen, you have to let go of identity, which can be painful, things that you've accustomed to holding on to. Letting go of that can feel painful. And it's part of you dies as you grow and moves, and yeah. So I think there is and it's not. I don't think it's a. I don't find it a pain. It doesn't always have to be. Oh my God, the world is. Sometimes it can just be this frustration or not understanding or these. I suppose there's these limitations of the ego. Why me? What's going on here? Me. But it's just. And then you come out the other end, then things start to fall into place.
You never know what's going to change your life.
No. And I think that's where we've really got to listen. Got to really listen because we consciously can't figure it. It's so complicated. Sometimes we can't figure it out. We just got to listen and flow with it. And then we find ourselves in a place that we want to be in, but we didn't realise that we had to go through the pain to get there.
Exactly. It's probably something that creative people only understand. But I don't know if you've seen the magazine. I'm just going to write up the interview.
Okay.
And I'm going to just see then if I'm going to do it in just a flowing text or question answer.
Okay.
But either way, I will send you the draft.
Okay, great.
And if you want to
that'd be wonderful.
Make any comments or points.
Yeah.
And
what's the name of the magazine again?
It's called Neptune. I don't know if you've.
Okay.
We haven't found the retailer yet in London, but it's in English and Icelandic. So we've been actually, which didn't surprise us. We kind of subconsciously knew that it was going to be more popular. We've been selling a lot more abroad than here.
Interesting.
So it's probably an interest in Iceland is helping us a lot. So.
Yes, yeah. Great.
But I don't know if you've recognized a magazine called Apartamento. It's Spanish.
I'm not very good on my magazines.
No, okay. Some are, follow it very closely and some not so.
Okay. And what?
But Sorry?
Do you have some connection with that, or with that magazine?
No, yeah, that was kind of the like our starting point.
Oh, I see.
Our inspiration, and
Yeah.
as we went into it, we were just four of us. Like we have like one is architect student, one is photographer. So we just wanted to like do something together.
Nice, yeah.
And that was kind of the best, I think. Yeah.
Great.
Way to do something. So
Yeah.
we've been very happy with the result, and also the what do you say, like
It's progressing nicely.
how it's been received.
Yes,
progressing.
yeah.
So, and like I think to be, I think like the end of June we'll try to release it. So it's end of July. So
All right.
I'll send you like soon.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. But thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
For this. It was very inspiring, and as I mentioned, it's been very helpful to use these methods. So
great. It was. Thank you for sharing that with me, because that kind of information really inspires me to keep going. That it can have an effect for people, which is very, very nice to know.